Hello and welcome to another Nonduality Podcast. This is Nick Higham from nisargayoga.com. Today I'm joined by Paul Dobson. There's raw aliveness. Whether the mind later on calls it pain or hunger or excitement or ecstasy or fear, put that label aside. There's no way of knowing what it is. Even the word raw aliveness is a provisional description. It is simply just raw life energy. It's existence. It's buzzing, it's alive, it's vital. It's full of life. It's full of what we seek. The absolute, whatever words you want to put on it, God. A direct knowing of that.
Yeah, it's nothing other than that, is it? The fact you exist and something's being here now is, to me, miraculous. Everything is included in that, including the pain. And I know it doesn't feel miraculous, as I'm not saying it does, but even the perception that it doesn't, you don't like the pain is part of that as well. You know, see reality as it is. See this as it is, not as you think it is. And then you're really in touch with, what a fact that is already there, that has already been present, but you somehow have, has been clouded over or veiled. It was never really lost, but it was veiled, let's say.
Yeah. You're looking for completeness, you're looking for home, you're looking for wholeness, the absolute, the true self. And we have this conception and perception that these forms are somehow removed from that. So we look at all these objects, or we experience our internal state at any given time. The thoughts, the sense perceptions. It can't be what I see, it can't be that. We're looking for the absolute, and all we're seeing is the relative. And also the sense that the relative is somehow lower or bad or sinful or not right or out of place, in contrast with the pure perfection of formlessness. We're seeing it everywhere, in every form, in every expression of that.
You know, we're in a situation where you just can't, there's nothing to compare to. Our comparisons are then made after the fact and are completely arbitrary. They're just meaningless comparisons, aren't they? Yet we really believe them. We genuinely believe. And that's where all the pain and suffering comes in, when we believe our comparisons and we believe something's better than another thing. And we get stuck in that and forget this fullness that is appearing immediately before those comparisons are made.
Yeah. We seek out the true self by means of our perception of ourself right now. And so we put all those things that we want onto that higher form. This search is based on the perception of the little me, which is fictitious. And so because of that, our clarity is clouded. It's distorted. It's not that this little ego self needs to change. And it's not that there is something better out there which you need to attain, whether that's through the material search or through the spiritual search or the relationship search, in whatever mode it takes. I'm not good enough. What I need is in the future, and it's in that thing, whether that's an actual object or an ethereal, godlike entity. Question what you take yourself to be.
And actually, any idea you have about yourself can't be valid. Any idea you have about anything is wrong, because it can't contract reality down to your ideas about it. The words and the ideas we have are just learned. They're just ideas. They don't exist. And that's when you can really open up to, okay, so what is this then? Then you can start like, okay, right, I've just realised everything I thought about this and I've learned isn't it. Even ideas about God and awareness and Brahman, and that's where it gets really subtle though. And these are good pointers though. That's not to say all is God is a really good pointer, I think, or all is Brahman. At some point that has to be dropped as well, because it can't be said what this is. And what you realise then is, okay, so all is God, or all is the absolute, let's say. That absolute, these ideas about it are none other than the absolute. The seeking is none other than the absolute, and the finding is none other than the absolute. So there's no problem here. Let it kind of reveal itself to you.
So we have to begin exactly where we are, and we have to work with what we know. So what do we know right now? Not saying get rid of anything, we're just saying see what's here, know what is here, and use that as your entry point. What do you know? And is what you know truth? Is what you know able to fully define what you are or what life is? And so you pass through these ideas and you're open to what begins to shine through. You basically know three things. You know mind. And what is mind? Mind is thoughts, conception. You know sense perception. You also know the sense of being. Usually that sense of being, that aliveness, falls into the background. Part of this then is to abide in that ground of being, to get to know it, remember it, to see how this I amness becomes qualified by thoughts, by perception and conception.
And it's that I amness, or that just that existence, that knowledge that you exist. That's the only thing you can really know in this moment right now. And that is also what lends reality to the appearances, because the two arise together, don't they? It's not appearances separate from existence. You know, if we're going on literally our raw first-hand experience, not second-hand knowledge, there's something happening here and something aware here. It's just, that's the basic fact.
Yeah. We can group what we know into categories. We know thoughts, which is conception, the mind's meaning making. We know sense perception, which is the five senses. From where did we get that knowledge? Is this direct knowledge? If we didn't have words or ways of formulating, conceiving, then would we be able to say what a sound is? Would we be able to say what a sight is? Could we put into words thought? No, because those two categories we've learned, meaning we've taken on to try and describe something that can't be described. So it's not direct. What is direct experience? If it's not mind and sense perception, what is that direct experience that you didn't have to learn, that you don't have to understand, that you may not even be able to put into words at all? What is it that is always present? What is it that never comes and goes? We can provisionally use words like aliveness, like existence, like presence, beingness. Whatever that capacity is, it's always here. All we can say is, I am here. I am now. And what is that here nowness other than that capacity, which seems to get veiled by our perceiving and our conceiving in direct experience? So our direct experience right now is here, now, an immediacy, a kind of like a definite conviction. It doesn't even have a boundary, doesn't have a location, doesn't have any real attributes, and we can put attributes on it. But in that raw, direct experience of what we're pointing to, this is all we can know, really. This is all we can really directly, truthfully know. In a way, there needs to be some kind of object for reality to shine upon. Without that apparent surface, that body-mind, reality can't know itself, because reality is absolute, indefinable, without attributes. What is known directly is that reflection, which we can call aliveness, presence, existence, here, nowness, reflects itself onto the body, reflects itself into the body, in all of these forms that we know. But all of these forms are nothing but reflections. That's the thing. They're not actual tangible objects. They are nothing but rays of the absolute, reflecting itself always. You have to kind of even question that sense, I am. In order to have a sense, there needs to be a sense-er. That's a very subtle duality, which we also have to question.
I like the way you put it, reflections. That kind of makes me think of, God, basically, let's call it God, is looking at itself in the mirror, realises I am. And then there's this kind of hall of mirrors, or, when you set up two mirrors together and you can see into infinity, like there's an infinite amount of selves kind of in the kind of reflections. That's kind of, I think that's quite a good comparison to what our situation is here. Ultimate reality, or Brahman, whatever you want to call it, is literally going, what am I? And it's kind of seeing everywhere, and this is the appearances that it's reflections of itself, trying to work out what it is. Going, I exist. It knows it exists because of these reflections.
When you're in a hall of mirrors, you don't see the mirrors. You only see reflections, and that's what we're experiencing right now. We're not experiencing a screen or a mirror, a surface onto which there are reflections, or is reflections of the absolute. That's all we're ever seeing. In fact, when I say we are, is a reflection itself. There is no me or we seeing the reflections. That sense of me aware of reflections is another reflection. But at some point, this metaphor breaks down because there are no surfaces on which to reflect. There is only the absolute.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. When we say I am present, what does that presence indicate? Is that presence that we see as attached to something? What is that presence indicating? Is it indicating the body? Is presence indicating the ego? Is the ego present? Is the body present? Is that presence different to the presence of another object other than the body? So is that presence attached to the body different to the presence of a mug or a glass or a tree? Can presence be split up and shared out to different objects? Is it that actually presence is primary and then objects come later? Objects derive their presence from that underlying presence, which we can call existence or whatever you want to call it. We see it as all of these objects have their presence and their different presences. But actually, no. You are presence, and in you appear many objects which get their presence from you. And these objects are nothing but presence or nothing but reflections.
The body is another reflection, appearance in this presence. There's no kind of barriers in between. These barriers are imaginary, but there's no other way of talking about it without putting subtle barriers in place, is there? Because otherwise you just kind of go, well, it's just this. It's all of this. And it's, so it's a tricky one. But yeah, I mean, and that's all we can know for absolute certain. I mean, that whether there are existing things out there or not we'll never know, because all we can know is this immediate thing. And if you look at a dream, and I think it's got to be the same creative intelligence, the infinite intelligence behind it, that is the same intelligence behind a dream. Because in real time, in a dream, objects and reflections, as we call it, are appearing, and a real world is made, and you're immediately as a separate self with surrounded by objects that appear to have their own existence, but they don't. They only are made of your dreaming mind, let's call it. And upon waking up, you realise that none of it existed. It was all in your mind. It was all made by you, or we can say it's all made by the infinite creative intelligence that all this is. the idea that this isn't just another dream is our idea. This could just be a more consistent version, with more rules in place than a nighttime dream. You know?
Exactly. We can't be certain that there's a world out there, nor can we be certain that there's a world in here, a personal world we call ourselves. All we can know are thoughts, conception, meaning making, and sense perception, the five senses, and that deeper sense of being. So when we perceive a world out there, a world in here, all we're perceiving are thoughts and sensations. That's it. If we just look beneath those second-hand ideas to what's direct here and now, call it existence, call it life, call it energy. It doesn't matter. I mean, any of those words will do, but let's just settle on one of them provisionally. Existence. And that existence is kind of like an intuitive presence, and it's intuiting the real, calling out reality, truth. Once that's realised, that existence, that presence is a reflection of truth, then you also start to notice that all the other things that can be known are doing the same, that hold the same. Existence, the sense of being, is equal to something that seems to be tangible, that seems to have a boundary around it. All of this arising here is nothing but those reflections. It's presence of the real. There's nothing but reality, and reality reflects itself or expresses itself in infinite detail. The human body mind is a kind of focusing. So it focuses on to details, or a collection of details, and sees duality. And zooming out, you begin to see the whole, the bigger picture.
Yeah, there's not something new called details, is there? It's not a new thing. It is just like, well, as we said, reflections of that bigger picture, the whole. It's completely inseparable from that. How that occurs, or what that is, or whatever it is, literally God knows. I don't know. I know that this is appearing right now. That's all I know. I know that there's an appearance here, and there's an awareness of that appearance, and the two are completely inseparable. Because you can take on as much secondhand knowledge as you want, really, in this life, and you will just be lost in absolute just complexity and just a never-ending stream of knowledge intake. Never actually getting anywhere, but appearing to. The fall from heaven. We ate that knowledge. We fell into our map and lost reality. We lost the territory. We lost heaven because of these ideas about it that we've got lost in. That's all. And just find your way back. If you want out of that game, there's actually a much more fulfilling and wholesome kind of route to go on with this stuff.
And this must be part of the cosmic joke. What are we finding our way back to? Back to reality. In other words, reality is finding its way back to reality by means of unreality. This manifestation is like a portal being used by reality to reconnect with its bigger, truer self. It's a metaphor, it's a story, it's not absolute, but it's kind of roughly what's going on. Now consider this, that the portal, which is unreality, the movement towards home, was not required before it appeared. Reality was perfect, whole, complete, immaculate, and yet in that reality arose a portal or a bridge for union. This ability to interact and to search wasn't required before it appeared. This whole world as we know it and life as we know it is an attempt at getting back to source. It's the means by which we transcend from the known into the unknown, from unreality to reality. So all of this has that purpose, we could say. We could sort of play with the idea that it has that utility of seeking that source. At the same time, there's something quite humorous about that, isn't there? I mean, that's absurd.
So it's a game, isn't it? And that's the joke. That is the joke is that upon apparent finding or realization, whatever you want to say, reality knowing itself, it actually you see that it never wasn't the case. It's like, and you feel it's almost you feel a bit silly, but it's funny. The whole thing's funny, really, in hindsight. At the time, it's very serious, and you've got to do lots of arduous spiritual work and perfect yourself and all this kind of nonsense. But and then you look back and you go, oh, nothing's changed. It always was this. And it's funny. It is very funny. They call it a cosmic joke because it's literally a prank being played. But reality is playing on itself as far as our descriptions go. As far as I can tell, it just seems like it's just. I mean, what else you gonna do with infinity? I suppose just play jokes on yourself, just mess around for a bit and create. I mean, that's why someone said, the losing is just as much as important as the finding, because reality had to apparently lose itself, having never lost itself, really, to then find itself again. It's seen as such a ridiculous situation we've put ourselves in.
It is totally ridiculous. It's totally nonsensical. It's the point where you realise there can be no meaning, because any meaning that you attribute is sort of ridiculous. It's God finding itself. God is all there is, and God is now finding itself. What? God is all there is, though. God is in a process of self-realization. What is the need of self-awareness for God? What is the need for self-knowledge, for reality? What is the purpose of the relative if the absolute is all there is?
But the absolute is only ever discovering itself, isn't it? Everywhere it looks, we have got limited intelligence. But what reality is infinite intelligence. And what we try to do is put our limited ideas and concepts onto reality. And then even in these subtle little stories we tell, like, the reason humans are here is for reality to know itself. Well, that's another human idea, isn't it? And it's a very seductive one, but it still can't be quite right, can it?
But isn't it based on this sense of, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what my life is about. I don't know where my life is going.
Yes.
And so we project that on to God. We project it onto the absolute.
Yeah.
The absolute doesn't know what it needs to know. It feels lost and deficient and isolated. No, that belief is limited to the conditioning of this form we call body-mind.
No, well, we can't know what it's about, but it transcends any ideas of meaning, of cause and effect, or of whys and hows and everything. It transcends any idea we can think about it, because that idea is just a very tiny, limited fragment of the actual reality. That you're just replacing one story for another story, and this story is higher than this story. You drop those as well, drop that story as well, and then reality actually reveals itself to itself on a non-verbal, non-conceptual, non-human idea level. And there's something really fulfilling and quite incredible there once you get past all of those stories, not just upgrading stories constantly. And this is coming from someone who loves to upgrade stories. Like, I love a story. And it's okay, as long as you know them as stories, of course.
Exactly. It's like you're just doing your best you can to express something that can't be expressed, but you also know that you can't express it. There's an underlying reality which no effort can reach or realise. And that reality is the essence of all things, of all forms. And the same reality is our true self. It's a provisional account of what seems to be going on, but it's flawed. Reality is underlying. Underlying what? If reality is all there is, how can it underlie something other than itself? How can it be a ground on which objects that aren't reality sit? Well, the objects are reality, and the ground on which they sit is reality. So there's no duality, there's no interface, there's no kind of relationship there. There's only reality. And also, reality is not an essence. This perception comes from our fascination with materialism. So reality, the absolute, is not a substance with qualities, a liquid, a gas, or a solid. That's what we know. That's what we know. We know solid, liquid, gas. And we tend to attribute the same qualities to this entity out there that we're trying to attain, trying to become. This is, again, is coming from our limited understanding of life. So reality is not an essence, and reality does not underlie anything. Reality is all there is. And at that point, you can't use the word reality, because reality suggests unreality. You know, the absolute suggests the relative. God suggests like the devil or something other than God. There is only that. And we can't say what it is.
It is itself. Which obviously is disappointing because you want some big story. But that's true. It is itself. That's all we can say. It's completely and utterly itself. It's like we've said before, and it's quite a funny little metaphor we've used by saying, you know, if only you took away time and space and objects and everything else, and there was all that existed was an apple. You wouldn't be able to call it an apple anymore, would you? It'd be existence. You couldn't even say that if there's just apple.
Yeah.
So everything, you know, and if little people started appearing as made out of apple, you know,
yeah,
it's you know, obviously it's a ridiculous metaphor.
Then you can start to create a world of difference, can't you? That apple, this apple, a red apple, green apple, and then you get lost in appleness, don't you? In all its variety.
Never get lost in appleness.
Bad apples, good apples, and that's really what's going on. There is only reality. Reality seems to be reflecting itself in infinite ways. With that reflecting, there are many shades of that reflection. It's true, but it's not truth. Exactly.
You exist. I am. I know that I am. I don't care what anyone says to me. I absolutely am. Not as Paul, but there is just an isness here, an absolute existence here. And appearances are happening. What those appearances are, I don't know. And I'm always here, and it's always now.
You can dispute the object quite easily through a process of inquiry. You can't dispute the isness of I am. However, you can know that the I am is the reflection of truth, mysteriously known, but that reflection is 100% reality. That's sufficient just to have that conviction, to recognize the same reality, the same presence, the same consciousness in all.
You can't possibly separate them, can you? They rise together as the I am, you know?
Yeah.
I am, the world is.
Exactly. That is what we call enlightenment. It's that apperception of I am, all is. That is awakening, that is enlightenment. It's just a reality. All there is a wakefulness. There's no thing that isn't that, because there are no things.
Yeah, it's not a big event, is it? It's not like some, you know, this is not to say people don't have mystical experiences as a result of this as some sort of side effect, because there's like a relaxing, it's like a build up of tension, thinking you're this little person and believing all of your ideas about reality, and then there's such a strong release of tension, either immediately or over time, depending on whether it's an immediate realization of, oh wow, or over time just a slow peeling away of layers. And with the immediate realization, there can be maybe an experience that goes with it because of a sudden release of tension. So it doesn't need to be like that, though. It is just realizing what's already the case, realizing reality as it is, not your ideas about it.